Hi, I'm John Blackburn, and this is Entertainment Matters. This is a podcast for people who make live entertainment happen. I talk with people from across entertainment and beyond to explore how we think about our work and how we put that thinking into practice. In arts and entertainment, the big question is, how do you get the freedom that you want and the security that you need? My favorite comedian, Jerry Seinfeld, has a great line about this. He said, the whole reason I became a comedian was so that between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. I could have uninterrupted mall schmooze time. I'm similar. I want to be able to pop into town and sit in a park with my friend for a coffee at 11 a.m. on a Monday. The freedom is I can do it at 11 a.m. on a Monday. The security is I can afford the coffee and the time. And I think for a lot of us, that's part at least of what attracted us to entertainment in the first place. Obviously, we loved the thing. We loved singing or dancing or playing the drums or being backstage and making the whole thing happen. And somewhere there was probably an idea about what the lifestyle might be like, that idea of freedom, a different kind of life. Then at some point, usually quite early on, we suddenly become very aware of security. Rent, bills, work drying up, all that, the gap between contracts or gigs. And we start wanting things to feel more stable. And when we start thinking about getting the security bit, we tend to inherit all these stories about how a career in entertainment is supposed to work. So if you're a dancer or a musical theatre performer, for example, you'll hear, you've just got to keep auditioning. Musicians say, you've just got to network. And the important word in there is just. Because when someone says just, often what they really mean is, I don't really know how this works either. Please stop asking me questions. So we inherit these stories and this sort of culture of just doing whatever we're meant to do until the big opportunity arrives that saves us from every problem in our lives. And while you wait for that opportunity to arise, you actually realize you need some security now. And when I talk about this kind of thing with people, it always reminds me of this time years ago when I was teaching drums in a school in Darlington. I used to teach in this big long room, and the drums were right at the bottom of the room and the door was way up at the top. And what started happening was at break time, these absolute lads were throwing open the door and throwing in open cans of Coke and then running away laughing. It went everywhere. And now this happened for a few weeks in a row, and I never saw who did it until one week I happened to be standing opposite the door as this kid threw it open and lobbed in this open can of Coke, which I caught. And I just looked at the kid and said, cool, now what? And he legged it. And you can imagine his mates, the ones who'd done it in the weeks running up to that point, saying, you just open the door and throw the can in. Just. And hidden inside that word is the entire plan. Hope that you're lucky and that it works out. And sometimes I think our plan for our entertainment careers is a bit like that too. So if waiting to get picked and hoping to be lucky isn't quite doing it for us, now what? Well, it turns out there might be another way of thinking about all of this. It's just a bit harder to see. And sometimes when things are hard to see, what we need is a different perspective, a different way of looking at things. And my favorite example of this is from when I was at primary school. Our head teacher, Mr. Elphick, proudly wheels in the school's first computer, a BBC Micro, and he tells us he's going to show us the Paint program. Now, my dad worked in IT, so we'd actually had one of these computers at home for a little while. Anyway, Mr. Elphick explains, all you have to do is just hold down the left mouse button and draw on the screen. Except every time he tried it, nothing happened. And after a few attempts, he started explaining that probably the computer was broken. But from the back of the room, I could see the problem immediately. He had the mouse upside down. So when he thought he was pressing the left button, he was actually pressing the right button. So I dutifully put my hand up and say, sir, the mouse is upside down. The cable needs to be at the top. And he says, no, a mouse's tail is at the bottom. And of course, in his model of the world, that was just a fact. A real mouse has its tail at the bottom, so therefore this mouse must also have its tail at the bottom. Anyway, eventually he gets me up to the front. I turn the mouse around and suddenly everything starts working. So same intention, same goal, same computer, same effort, but different perspective. And that's really all a model is. A model is a way of looking at something. And sometimes if you want to get different results, it helps to try a different model. So here's a model I want to give a go with you today. There's basically two kinds of people in live entertainment. Firstly, there's what I call practitioners. That's performers of any kind, singers, dancers, musicians, actors, but also it's sound engineers, lighting engineers, stage managers, creatives, writers. Now, we tend to think of ourselves as all being very different from one another, but actually the fundamental structure of how those different careers work is remarkably similar. Practitioners basically get paid by producers. Now, producer means something very specific in this model. A producer is just someone who creates an opportunity where one or more practitioners gets paid. That could be a theatre show. It could be a gig in a pub. It could be a dance class. It could be a workshop, a tour, a choir, a recording project. And importantly, you can be both. So if you're a Rod Stewart tribute act and you hire a village hall, you sell the tickets, and then you perform the show yourself, you are both the producer and the practitioner. You created the opportunity and then you worked within it. Now, this distinction matters because practitioners and producers have different ways of getting more of what they want. And remember, broadly speaking, what most of us want is some combination of freedom and security. So if you're a practitioner, there's only really 5 categories of activities that you can do to get more freedom and security. Now, you'll recognize all of them. The first one is more work. When you first finish training or you're starting in the industry, you just want to get some gigs. Then you want to get some more gigs. The second is what I call a related side hustle. So something where it might not be the exact job that you train to do, but it keeps you in the environment. It keeps you in the industry. So for example, very popular for musicians is teaching. Very popular for musical theatre performers, working front of house in a theatre, or social media for production companies. It's something where you're still connected with the industry. You're still around the kinds of people you want to be around. The third is an unrelated side hustle. So obviously something like working in a cafe or working in a shop, whatever pays the bills and gives you some security whilst you pursue the thing you actually want. That's the classic story, isn't it? If you're in like an originals band, those people will quite often have a day job. Now, the fourth is where most people usually end up focusing, which is better work. So not just more gigs, but better gigs, better clients, better contracts. So higher fees, better environments, better treatment. And then there's the fifth one, which is my personal favorite, which is you can become a producer. You can start creating opportunities instead of waiting for opportunities. Now, what's interesting about these 5 categories is pretty much everything you do for your career either contributes to one of these 5 practitioner categories or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, it might still be enjoyable. It might still matter to you. It might be helping you grow as a person, but it might not be contributing to more freedom and security. And I think this is where things start to get really interesting because so many of us are working so hard, but are not actually clear on exactly which game we're playing. So how does being a producer actually work? We talked about practitioner. How does being a producer work? Well, people think that producing is complicated, and I don't think it is complicated. It can be difficult, but I don't think it's complicated. I think the basic structure of it is actually very simple, certainly within this model. So A producer creates opportunities, projects, it could be shows, classes, experiences where one or more practitioners get paid. And there's basically 5 resources you need to either build, own, or have access to in order to do that work. The first one, which every practitioner that becomes a producer loves, is the content. That's the concept, the IP, the creative bit. What is the thing? The songs, the choreography, the arrangements, the script, the creation of the experience that the audience is having. The second is platform. So how does an audience experience this thing that you've created? A theatre is a platform, a pub is a platform, a cruise ship stage is a platform, online is a platform, a video is a platform, a village hall, a rehearsal room, whatever it is. Where does the audience experience the thing that you've made? That's platform. Now, the third one is payment. There has to be a mechanism where everybody gets paid. Could be ticket sales, could be a client, could be a contract, something. But there has to be a mechanism for payment. The fourth is practitioners. Somebody actually has to deliver the thing that you've created. That practitioner might be you as the producer. It might be one performer and one technician. That would be 2 practitioners in your show. Well done. Now, the fifth one is audience, people to experience the work. Or in some cases, an audience might be a client. Now, success as a producer is largely about your ability to get closer and closer to those 5 resources, building them or building relationships, owning them, strengthening your access to them. And a lot of people struggle when they first become producers because, as I mentioned earlier, most producers originally got into the business as practitioners, which means their training was largely about pick me. It was largely auditioning, go to class, work on your skills, be personable, maybe network a bit, and hope you get picked. As a practitioner, someone else largely decides what you do. And if you do that thing successfully over time, you get paid, whether or not the project, the show, the class, whatever, works commercially. But as a producer, you have to decide what to do, and then you have to get yourself to actually do it. And becoming a producer is really just taking the highest level of responsibility, which is why it has the highest potential payoff. And really, moving forwards in either category, actually, practitioner or producer, comes down to taking responsibility. Taking responsibility, of course, comes down to your ability to, as I call it, push your own buttons. Now, if you think about these 2 categories, practitioner, producer, you probably already have a pretty good idea which one you're in. And you might even have a different idea about which one you'd like to be in the future. So as you look at the different options, those 5 options in each category, whichever one you're in, you already know some things you could do to move yourself forwards towards having more freedom and security. And I think that people in general already know a lot more than they think they do. You already know at least one thing you could do to move forwards. You already know someone you could contact. You already know a conversation that you could have. You already know a thing that maybe you've been avoiding where the payoff for your freedom and security could be huge. Actually, a friend of mine and I, we have this running gag. Whenever one of us is talking about a really good idea that neither of us are currently doing, we say to each other, of course, it's nothing we don't already know. And that is the frustrating bit, isn't it? It's not usually that people don't know enough. It's that they haven't learned how to push their own buttons consistently enough to actually do the things they already know would probably help. And if you'd like some help figuring some of that stuff out for yourself, I'd be very happy to have a conversation with you. Usually in that conversation, we find out what you currently want, what game you're currently playing, so what your current activities add up to, and whether that plan, those current activities are actually taking you to what you say you want. Now, sometimes it's surprisingly difficult to see your own situation clearly from inside it, especially in entertainment where a lot of the culture, of course, is just keep going, just audition more, just network. Sometimes what helps is another perspective, just like turning the mouse around. If you can see the system, if you can see the environment slightly differently, you can make better decisions and take more productive action and enjoy the whole thing more. Because, of course, Mr. Elphick, my head teacher at primary school, wasn't stupid, and the computer wasn't broken. And it wasn't that he wasn't putting enough effort in. He was just working from a model of the situation that made the whole thing impossible. And again, I think a lot of people in entertainment are doing something similar, working really hard, trying really hard, wanting something really badly, but largely still hoping to get lucky, hoping that no one catches the can, hoping that the next opportunity fixes every problem in their lives, and hoping somehow it all just works out. And I just think there are probably better plans than that. And if you'd like to have that conversation, there's a link below. Thanks for listening, and thanks for whatever you do to make live entertainment happen. If you'd like to be notified when there's a new episode and stay up to date with the podcast, you can sign up for the Entertainment Matters Cue Sheet at the link in the description. Have a great show.